The National Guard traces its roots all the way back to December 13, 1636, when the Massachusetts Bay Colony assembled its various militia units into an organized regimental structure. The Wyoming National Guard began to take shape over 200 years later on April 4, 1870, when Territorial Governor John Allen Campbell issued General Order No. 1, which authorized the division of the territory into 3 military districts. A year later, Wyoming's Territorial Assembly passed a law effective December 13, 1871, giving legal sanction to the formation of volunteer militia companies of not less than 40 men. The first of the 3 military districts was Laramie County, commanded by Colonel Luke Murrin. The second was comprised of Albany, Carbon, and Uintah counties, commanded by Colonel J.W. Donnellan, and the third was Sweetwater County, commanded by Colonel J.W. Anthony. Over the following decades, several militia groups organized and disbanded to respond to specific issues. In 1895, the militia began to be referred to as the Wyoming National Guard. The Wyoming National Guard's first federal mission came during the outbreak of the Spanish-American War. On February 15, 1898, a U.S. Navy ship called the USS Maine exploded in Havana, Cuba Harbor, a Spanish territory. The USS Maine was sent to Havana Harbor to protect U.S. interests during the Cuban War of Independence. The sinking of the Maine incited U.S. passions against Spain, and on April 25th, Congress declared war on Spain. President William McKinley called for 125,000 volunteers. In order to meet the demand of imminent combat in Cuba and the Philippines, the U.S. needed to augment its 50,000-man regular army with National Guard units. Approximately 1,000 of these volunteers were from the Cowboy State. Wyoming's most significant contribution to the war was 1 battalion of infantry consisting of 4 companies, augmented by an artillery battery. The 1st Wyoming Volunteer Infantry Battalion was comprised of the following companies: Company C from Buffalo, Company F from Douglas, Company G from Sheridan, and Company H from Evanston. The 1st Wyoming Volunteer Infantry was mustered into service in May 1898. 460 men of the 1st Wyoming Volunteer Infantry fought in the Philippines. 13 days after arriving in the Philippines, the order was received for our forces to capture Manila. The Wyoming infantrymen were part of the leading charge and were among the first to enter the city after heavy fighting. At 4:15 p.m. on August 13, 1898, the Wyoming Battalion flag was raised over the Spaniards' Luneta Barracks, which the 1st Wyoming argued was the first United States flag to be raised in the city. Wyoming Guardsmen fought from August 1898 until July 1899, losing 12 soldiers in battle and to disease. After the war, the Wyoming Guard remained active in state missions such as riot control and guarding high-profile prisoners. In the first decade of the 1900s, a significant event took place. The U.S. Congress passed the Militia Act of 1903. This gave state National Guards access to federal funding for equipment, training, and transportation, while requiring state National Guards to establish regular drill and annual training schedules and inspections. Additionally, the act gave the president the power to call up the National Guard and required states to organize, equip, and train their units in line with regular Army standards. The first notable federal deployment for the Wyoming Guard in this period came in 1916. On March 9th, during the Mexican Revolution, Pancho Villa's revolutionary forces raided the town of Columbus, New Mexico. This act, along with several other prior raids, led to U.S. troops crossing the southern border to capture Pancho Villa. On June 18, 1916, President Wilson mobilized the National Guard to patrol the border and to protect it from further raids by Villa's men. After training at Camp Kendrick in Cheyenne, the Wyoming National Guard left for Deming, New Mexico, where they spent 5.5 months conducting further training and patrolling the border until their return in March 1917. It was only 4 months later, in July, that the Wyoming National Guard was called up again. World War I erupted across Europe in 1914. However, the United States did not declare war on Germany until April 6, 1917. That was when the 3rd Wyoming Infantry was sent to Camp Green, North Carolina as part of the 41st Infantry Division. They were divided into 3 units before deploying to Europe. 1st Battalion, 3rd Wyoming formed the 148th Field Artillery Regiment along with Oregon and Colorado units. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions became the 116th Ammunition Train, and the regiment's machine gun company joined the 41st's 146th Machine Gun Battalion. The 116th provided logistical support and transportation for the 41st, while the 148th participated in the Battle of Chateau Thierry, the Champagne-Marne Defense, the Aisne-Marne Offensive, the St. Michael Offensive, and the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. After the armistice, the Wyoming Guard remained on occupation duty in Germany into 1919 until they returned to Cheyenne for demobilization. World War I is also when Wyoming's iconic bucking horse and rider logo originated. The officers of the 148th Artillery started a competition for the soldiers to draw an insignia that the unit could be identified by during the Chateau Thierry Offensive. One soldier, First Sergeant George N. Ostrom, decided to use his horse Red Wing as inspiration to create his submission for the insignia. Using the band's bass drum, he took some camouflage paint and drew the now iconic logo. He took the drumhead to the officers' quarters, and according to Ostrom, the contest immediately was over, and his insignia was marked on all the unit's equipment and uniforms. For our troops, the insignia was a symbol of pride and a reminder of home, the great state of Wyoming. After the war, the Wyoming Guard was reorganized from infantry into cavalry units designated initially as the 1st Wyoming Cavalry Regiment in 1920 and later as the 115th Cavalry in 1921. The 1920s remained otherwise uneventful for the Wyoming Guard, other than state services such as strike duty at various railways and coal mines. Western movie star Tim McCoy had served as Wyoming's Adjutant General after World War I and later was able to get some Wyoming Guardsmen into movies as extras. Troop I can be seen in the 1932 film The End of the Trail. And the entire regiment can be seen in 1936's The Plainsman.
Holy saints!
This regiment conducted training primarily at Pole Mountain Reservation until Camp Guernsey was established in 1938. The Wyoming National Guard's participation in World War II began in the fall of 1940. The 41st Military Police Company joined the HQ Company of the 41st Division and spent the war in the Pacific Theater, deploying to Australia, New Guinea, the Philippines, and Japan for occupation duty until their return home in 1946. The 116th Quartermaster Regiment reported to Camp Murray near Fort Lewis, Washington in September 1940. They are redesignated as the 186th Quartermaster Company and served in the Persian Gulf Services Command, delivering supplies through Iraq and Iran to the Soviet Union to aid in their fight against the Axis powers. The 115th Cavalry arrived in Fort Lewis, Washington in March of 1941. After the attacks on Pearl Harbor, the bulk of the 115th performed coastal patrol all along the Pacific coast. The headquarters troop of the 115th served in 2 campaigns in Europe, France, and Germany. The Wyoming Air National Guard was first organized in a small hangar on the southwest side of Cheyenne Municipal Airport in Wyoming. Being one of the first states to receive an Air Guard unit, the 187th Fighter Squadron received federal recognition on August 11, 1946. The 187th was a redesignation of the Army Air Force's 402nd Fighter Squadron, a highly decorated unit that was deactivated on November 10, 1945. September 18, 1947, however, is considered the Wyoming Air National Guard's official birth date, concurrent with the establishment of the United States Air Force as a separate branch of the United States military. The Cheyenne Regional Airport served as the 187th's home base, but they also trained in Casper at the Casper Army Air Base. F-51s were primarily assigned to the 187th in the late 1940s, as well as other training and cargo aircraft. The 115th Cavalry was disbanded in the post-war years, and the 300th Armor Field Artillery Battalion and the 141st Tank Battalion were created. The Wyoming National Guard began to mobilize in response to the Korean conflict in August 1950. The 300th AFA was the first to mobilize. Batteries A and C entered combat on 15 May 1951 alongside the 2nd Infantry in the Battle of Soyang. They were attacked by approximately 120,000 Chinese soldiers and fired over 7,200 105mm rounds in a 24-hour period. The 300th received 2 Presidential Unit Citations, 2 Republic of Korea Presidential Unit Citations, a Meritorious Unit Citation, 12 Silver Stars, and 63 Bronze Stars. The battalion fired over 400,000 rounds during its time in Korea and returned in 1954. The 141st Tank Battalion also deployed to Germany to reinforce NATO units against a possible Soviet aggression. The Wyoming Air Guard flying P-51s was activated on April 1, 1951 for service in the Korean conflict. 18 pilots from the 187th Fighter Squadron were sent to Japan and Korea, where they flew 1,500 combat missions. In 1956, the 187th Fighter Squadron became the 187th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, and was redesignated again 2 years later as the 153rd Fighter Interceptor Group, and it received its first F-86 Sabre jet aircraft. In 1960, the Wyoming Army Guard Aviation Section received its first helicopter, an H-23C Raven, as well as 7 L-19 single-engine light reconnaissance aircrafts and 1 L-26 passenger cargo plane. During the Berlin Crisis in 1961, the Army Guard was federalized for the first time since the Korean War, when the 1022nd Engineer Battalion was activated and sent to Fort Lewis, Washington. Throughout the 1960s, the Army Guard also participated in several stateside missions such as search and rescue, firefighting, and blizzard relief. In 1961, a dramatic change came for the Wyoming Air Guard. Its mission changed from a fighter unit, and they began flying C-119 flying boxcar aircraft, and the 187th Aeromedical Transport Squadron was born, focused on airlifting medical patients. This unit received the C-121 Super Constellation in 1963 and began to fly missions worldwide, entering the realm of Southeast Asia and Vietnam in 1964. Early on, in 1966, they were converted to the 153rd Military Airlift Group. The Wyoming National Guard remained relatively inactive abroad throughout the rest of the Cold War. However, there were many state emergencies that the Guard responded to. In the 1960s, the Wyoming Guard responded to over 65 natural disasters, including fires, floods, and blizzards. New unit formations and reorganizations also occurred during this period. In the mid-1970s, the Wyoming Army and Air National Guard received 2 important missions. The 1022nd Medical Detachment began their air ambulance mission to perform search and rescue roles to support civilian authorities. 1975 saw the formation of what would become Wyoming's most deployed unit up to the present day. The 1022nd Helicopter Ambulance Medical Detachment was organized with 50 people and 6 U-1H helicopters. The Air Guard received its Modular Airborne Firefighting Systems, better known as MAFs. It gave them aerial firefighting capabilities to ultimately fight wildfires. 2 C-130s were fitted with the system to enable the Air Guard to drop water and fire retardant on fires throughout the United States. The 153rd Airlift Wing is one of the 4 military units that support the MAFs mission. While the Army Guard hadn't been activated since its federalization in 1961, they did go abroad a number of times throughout the 80s for training exercises and humanitarian missions. In 1984, the 197th Public Affairs Detachment went to Germany for reforger. In 1987, the 115th Field Artillery Brigade and 349th Artillery held their annual training in Korea for Exercise Team Spirit 87. In 1989, the 133rd Engineer Company traveled to Honduras to build roads. Nearly 30 years after the Wyoming Army Guard's last activation, in 1990, the 1022nd Medevac Company received orders to deploy to Saudi Arabia to provide medical evacuation support to the 3rd Armored Division in Desert Storm and Desert Shield. There they flew 1,300 hours, and 15 soldiers received Bronze Stars or Air Medals during this deployment. After Desert Storm, the next operation abroad would be the 133rd Engineer Company's departure to Panama for 17-day rotations in support of Task Force Rushmore, where they conducted engineering, medical, humanitarian, and civic projects. Following this, in 1991, the 187th Aeromedical Evacuation Flight was federally activated and deployed to Saudi Arabia for service in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, to provide medical liaison teams, operate aeromedical staging facilities, and airlift wounded personnel. From July 1993 to February 1994, the 187th AES participated in Operation Restore Hope in Egypt and Somalia. 3 personnel received commendations for life-saving medical treatment of Rangers, Delta Force operators, 10th Mountain soldiers, and UN soldiers throughout the mission. From November 10th to December 5th, 1997, the Wyoming Air Guard flew 250 MAFS missions in the jungles of Indonesia as part of Operation Tempest Rapid. This was the first time U.S. airborne firefighting missions had ever been done outside the continental U.S. The Wyoming Air Guard supported many other operations abroad in the 90s, such as Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti in 1995, Operation Southern Watch in Iraq in 1996 and 98, Operations Joint Endeavor and Shining Hope in Bosnia in 1996 and 99, Operation Joint Forge in Bosnia and Kosovo in 1999, and Operation Coronet Oak in Panama in 2000. The 2000s saw a drastic increase in tempo for the Wyoming Guard. In 2001, the 1022nd Medical Company left for a 6-month peacekeeping mission, Operation Joint Forge, in Tuzla, Bosnia. While the 1022nd was overseas, the 9/11 terrorist attacks occurred. The 153rd Airlift Wing responded immediately and was the first unit to resume flying, ferrying blood donations around the western United States. From October 2001 until mid-2002, soldiers from the Wyoming Guard augmented security at Wyoming's airports. The 153rd Security Forces Detachment was activated to augment security at Air Force bases. In December 2001, 5 aircraft and their crews from the Wyoming Air Guard deployed to Oman as part of Operation Enduring Freedom. They flew over 5,500 hours to include 4,000 combat hours in Afghanistan during this deployment. From 2003 to 2005, over 500 soldiers from the 4th Infantry Rear Operations Center, 1022nd Medical Company, 1041st Engineer Company, Detachment 53, 2/300th Field Artillery Battalion, and 115th Field Artillery Brigade deployed to various countries abroad to include Afghanistan and Iraq, kicking off the Wyoming Guard's direct involvement in the global war on terror. In 2004 and 2005, the 153rd maintained a 2-year, 2-aircraft commitment to Iraq. When Hurricane Katrina landed on the Gulf Coast in 2005, 4 Army Guard Black Hawk helicopters and 2 Air Guard C-130s from Wyoming mobilized to New Orleans along with 19 soldiers, 4 Air Guard flight nurses, and the C-130 crews. In Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, the Wyoming Army Guard performed a variety of roles, including security and training local police and armies. And in 2006 and 2007, the 153rd had 2 to 3 aircraft and crews rotating to and from Afghanistan. In 2007, the 1041st Engineer Company became the Wyoming Army Guard's most decorated unit since the Korean War, when it returned from a security mission in Iraq, receiving 30 Purple Hearts. Later, in 2019, Charlie Company, 1st of the 297th Infantry, stood up for their first deployment abroad for a peacekeeping mission in Kosovo. Also that year, soldiers from 115th and 2300th deployed to Iraq, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and other locations in Southwest Asia as part of Operation Spartan Shield in the U.S. Central Command, as well as supporting European commands in Germany. From 2019 to 2021, over 400 airmen were activated or deployed for COVID relief, MAFS missions, or operations abroad. The Wyoming National Guard has a rich and varied history. Its first units formed in 1870, and over 150 years later, we have more than 40 units in 2 military branches. The Wyoming National Guard continues to provide soldiers and airmen to defend the nation wherever needed. Today, the Wyoming Air and Army National Guard continues to support stateside missions and natural disaster relief efforts. Additionally, since September 2001, more than 3,900 soldiers and airmen have deployed and continue to deploy, up until the present day. These acts epitomize the spirit of all our Wyoming Guardsmen, those who currently serve and all those who have come before us. We are the Wyoming National Guard. We continue to serve as the sword and shield for our state and nation.
Say I've just got back from World War number 2. I've just got back from World War number 2. But it seems to me I still got some shooting to do. My baby, she's been running round. My baby, she's been running round. I'm gonna take my German Luger and blow that playhouse down.